Okay, thank you, Janet. Thank you all again for joining Legal Value Network for our webinar, a look at client-side AI-powered legal spend analytics tools. I'm Justin Ergler, Director of Alternative Fee Intelligence and Analytics at GlaxoSmithKline, and I also serve on the board of LVN. In that role, I encourage anyone that is in attendance today who is not already a member of LVN to go to our website, www.legalvaluenetwork.com, and join. We have a special program through the end of 2020 that any business or law professional, meaning a client, a service provider, or a law firm member, can join for free. The LVN board, we recognize that people have tight budgets right now and that they still need to access our community and have access to our high-value content. So we have created a special complimentary membership option for this period, and we encourage you to join our over 330 members as of today. There's so many reasons to do it before LVN closes our content to members only, and that will still include complimentary members, but we are going to close the website and go to kind of a members only for things like the rebroadcast of a webinar like this and so on and so forth. Here are some great examples of our upcoming professional development content. On August 6th, Unless You Keep Asking with Casey Flaherty, an understanding of the dynamic relationships between law firms and clients. Also in August, we have Law Firm Economics 101, a client-focused primer on the primary levers of law firm performance. Relationships will benefit from establishing a common understanding of the incentives that motivate behaviors in the delicate provider-to-client relationships. I want to personally thank all of you for joining us today. LVN is working to create this community and working hard to find ways to bring us all together through various things such as webinars, roundtables, groups, and forums. So keep watch for new ways to engage with your community on the Legal Value website. Now it's my responsibility to mention a few of the housekeeping items before we kick off this exciting session. First, the only video feed that you will see is for our panelists. Second, everyone is on mute except for the panelists. Third, the event will be recorded and will be available on our website soon after the live event closes. Fourth, questions are encouraged absolutely throughout the program by using the Q&A feature at the bottom of your Zoom screen. And with that, I'm excited to introduce you to our topic and our panelists. So welcome to a look at client-side AI-powered legal spend analytics tools. More and more clients are now relying on very sophisticated, often AI-powered analytics tools from both startups and legacy providers to better understand and benchmark their legal spend. Most of these tools provide real-time monitoring and better information for setting budgets, alternative fees, and negotiating with outside counsel. Clients who use these tools are often ahead of their firms in understanding what legal work can, and sometimes more importantly, should cost. We are joined today by three esteemed panelists. I'll give you a bit of background on each of them, and then they can tell you more about the companies that they work for. First, we have Brad Blickstein, who is the principal at the Blickstein Group and partner and co-head of the NewLaw practice group at Baretz+Brunelle. Brad is a legal industry strategist, advisor, and futurist responsible for initiatives which have helped to change the legal services industry. In his work with Blickstein Group, Brad works to help legal service providers better understand and serve client needs and to provide cutting-edge information about legal technology, law departments, and legal operations. Within the NewLaw practice group, Brad educates clients on the industry's evolution of legal services and positions them for success by developing novel products, systems, and solutions which modernize the delivery of legal services. Next, we have Arun Mistry, who is the Vice President of Legal Operations at Providence St. Joseph Health. Arun is an entrepreneurial business operations leader with more than 20 years of experience working with legal professionals, both in-house and in private practice. He excels at developing and implementing long-term business strategies and is highly skilled at idea generation that translates into effective go-to-market strategies. And finally, we have Brad Rogers, who is the Chief Operations Officer and Chief of Staff of the legal group at Teachers Insurance and Annuity Association of America. Brad is transforming the entire legal function at TIAA. Reading his bio makes me tired, and including the operating model, staffing plan, technology roadmap, vendor management, and employee culture and engagement. Brad is responsible for law, government, and regulatory affairs, and is corporate secretary at TIAA, which is a Fortune 50 global financial services organization. Thank you, Brad, Aaron, and Brad, for being here today with the Legal Value Network. And I'll now hand it off to Brad Blickstein to start the program. I hope everybody enjoys.
Thank you, Justin. I really appreciate that, and really appreciate those kind introductions. So, since legal e-billing has been around for decades at this point, and only recently really have some of these tools started to leverage new AI type technology in order to help clients get more and use better data about their legal spend. I've studied this issue quite extensively through my work putting together the Blickstein Group Legal AI Efficacy Report. And I'm really excited about this panel where we can start to dig in on what some of these new tools, and sometimes they're new tools, sometimes they're sort of new modules on old tools, can help clients accomplish, and therefore help law firms understand what they need to do to serve their clients well. And I'm really excited that we have Brad and Arun with us today. Each of them have been in the process of transforming their law departments, and each of them are using some of these specialized tools to help understand and do more with their own legal spend to make better decisions and find better options. So if we can, Arun and Brad, let's start maybe with Arun. Just maybe say hi and let me talk just for a minute about what your company, a little bit about your company, a little bit about your legal department, and a little bit about what your objectives are for the journey that you have already started.
Thanks, Brad. So I hope everybody can see me. I can't see myself. My name's Arun Mistry. I'm the VP of Legal Operations with Providence and Joseph Health. We are a large Catholic nonprofit health organization. We have 51 hospitals and about 800 clinics, mainly focused in 7 states across the western United States and some in Texas and New Mexico. Our legal department, overall, we're about a $25 billion company. We have about 125,000 employees, caregivers. The legal department is quite small. It's about 40 attorneys plus 20 support staff, and we function across the board. So every different ministry, we advise them. We advise in every different region. We're geographically spread across the country. The department has grown kind of organically. We merged in 2016 with the St. Joseph Health Group from California. They brought in their legal professionals. We came together as one. So we've been in rapid growth mode as a department for the past 5 years, trying to build out technology, build out core services, make sure that our structure and our plan is concurrent and in line with where our organization is going. And we are growing as an organization very quickly as well. So about 1.5 years ago, the leadership here made a decision to bring in a legal operations professional. Previous to working in legal operations, I was the COO for a law firm, a medium-sized law firm here in Seattle. I've done that for about 7 years, and I've been working with firms for, as my bio said, over 20 years. And so this is my first role in-house. And so the objectives of bringing someone in is, same as most legal operations roles, to dissect the people, technology, and process, and to increase efficiency, work better with our outside counsel, make sure that internally we're using technology, we're using people as efficiently as possible. And from a individual perspective and from an organizational perspective, we have stewardship over the funds that we have. Every dollar that we save in legal and every piece of efficiency that we put into place goes back into our mission. So every day kind of it speaks to the mission of the organization to help kind of increase resources that are available for caring for the poor and needy and providing healthcare out there. And so that's a real motivator as well. But legal operations is new to the organization, so we are just kind of getting our feet wet and kind of re-educating both the external counsel that we work with and our internal lawyers as to what legal ops will provide and what the purpose is.
Brad, how about you?
Thanks, Brad, and thanks, Arun. Hi, everybody. This is Brad Rogers. I'm here in New York City, and nice to meet you all. and thanks for inviting me on the panel, Brad. I'm at a company called TIAA. We're a financial services company. We manage about a little over $1 trillion on behalf of our participants who we pay to and through retirement when they retire. We're a 100-year-old company. And I myself, I am a transformation person. I've led major big game transformations elsewhere in Fortune 100, Fortune 10 companies before. And about a little less than 5 years ago, I was brought in by a brand new chief legal officer here at TIAA to transform the legal organization with the intention of becoming world-class. And pretty proud of the journey that we've been on since then. And we'll talk more about how we got there. But what we've achieved in the last few years is we've been able to take over 30% of the cost out of the entire complex and reinvested a lot of that in people and capabilities. Been able to lower, on track this year to lower our outside counsel spend by 30%. Built a benchmarked world-class legal ops capability. We won an award for that this year, and we're benchmarked by a company with 20 other firms. They're also world-class, so that's newly delivered. And our new operating model is a flex model that was able to handle COVID without a problem. So that's what we've achieved along this journey. And I think during the call, we'll talk a little bit about some of the things we've done, our perspectives, and how we're leveraging some of these drivers of we think, disruption in the market to our advantage to help get ahead of that and change and take advantage of that and reap some rewards from it.
Great, thanks guys. So let's set our agenda for today. First, I think we are in a phase of disruption around legal spend. We'll talk a little bit about what's driving that. I'm going to dig in a little bit more specifically about the types of technology that are out there and where AI fits within them. We're going to have Arun and Brad both talk in some detail about their own journeys within their own law departments using some of these tools. We're going to look ahead and talk about where we see all of this going. And we're going to make sure we talk about incentives, which are critical to the success of any program. So let's start with by talking about what is driving the disruption. Brad, I know you have a lot of thoughts about this. You put together a nice little program about it. Why don't you maybe take us through your kind of 4 pillars of destruction of just.
Okay, sure.
I said destruction, I meant disruption. Maybe it's both.
Disruption.
I'll let you decide.
Yeah. So thanks, Brad. And we think in the legal ops world and us at TIAA on this journey agree that there's a disruption going on. And maybe not everybody likes that term, but there's a major change going on in the legal industry that's not unlike what the healthcare industry or what doctors went through 20 years ago. And it's driven by 4 forces. And those forces are here. The first one, technology. Naturally, we've all seen the explosion in legal tech and the investments in that. But we think here, and AI is on the horizon and such, but we think here that it's not technology in the sense that it's going to automate lawyers' jobs away. It's technology in the sense that it's going to bring transparency and data to drive this disruption, this change. It allows us to think differently about what we're doing and how we do it. Second is the rise of legal ops, the rise of business professionals running legal organizations. This is what happened in the medical industry. The MBAs are coming, and they're taking that data and they're thinking differently about the business and using all these new technologies, data, and other capabilities to rethink how we do this and help our lawyers, what we call it, operate at the top of their license. This actually is a productivity play at the heart of this. And so that's a new movement. Third, we'll call it the replacement cost revolution. There are new ways of getting law done out there that didn't exist 5 or 10 years ago. Some of those are offshore vendors like we use that are lawyers that help our lawyers lever up. alternative legal service providers you all heard of, like Axiom, Cadence, and Legility. Those are new and inexpensive ways to get the work done. And which brings me to the fourth driver is operating model innovation. And here's a way to take advantage of those three other phenomena in our industry, is to rethink how we get matters done and how we get the work done in those matters. So on the second, the work done in the matters is an operating model transformation that we've gone through. We call it the flex model, where we disaggregate the work in a matter and we allow our lawyers to play like project managers, and they can allocate that work out to these new resources that are available in the replacement cost revolution and keep track of all the data to help get that done with this technology that's available and the data that's available. So those are the forces we think are driving this disruption. I'll leave it at this, Brad, that these disruptors basically started in 2009 with the Great Recession. And now with what we're all experiencing right now, we think that these are just accelerating even more. So these same drivers here are doubling down on their ability to catalyze this change.
Arun, have these drivers pushed you guys to make some of the moves that you guys are making?
Yeah, I think it's definitely something that's come to the fore for us and something that I've been thinking about. And I think that especially given the transition between law firms and working for an in-house organization, there's definitely drivers out there, especially the technology driver, the rise of legal operations, and then these use of external kind of legal process outsourcing companies. This is where a lot of the value lies. They've broken down the process into smaller and smaller chunks and said, hey, we can do that chunk better. We can use technology to do that better. And it's been the in-house drivers that have been really pushing this disruption forward, because I think that the traditional model for law firms has, it hasn't changed that much. They charge by the hour, and that's where their value lies, and that's how partners get paid. There's comp models, there's origination credit, there's responsibility credit. But for us, the pressures are business-based pressures. So we're looking at our finance department is coming to us and saying, hey, can you give me a predictable cost for legal? And traditionally you can just say, well, no, we don't know how much legal work we're going to get. But now more and more tools are out there to give us more insight into what we're spending, how we're spending it, whether we can get that level of predictability out there. And so they're coming to us and say, well, look, we're using technology in other areas of our business that have disrupted. And as Brad mentioned, the healthcare industry, that's been underway for about the last 20 years now. And so now they're looking at the different departments and saying, well, can you use technology to give us more predictable, transparent pricing and costing so that we can build that better into our budget? So yeah, we are looking at that too. And we're at the beginning of this journey, but this is definitely something that we're aware of.
That sounds great. Yeah, I think that's absolutely the case. One way I'd like to look at this is that it felt like until 2009, general counsel had, I call it like a cape of immunity. Like the finance people would say, you're spending too much money, or we need to know how much you're spending. And the GC would say, oh, it's really unpredictable and there's a lot of risk and we can't really answer that question. And like, it would just the problem would just go away, or the question would go away. And starting with the Great Recession, as you pointed out, Brad, there's not, that cape is framed, and law departments are expected to be able to answer the same questions that every other business line in the company can answer. So let's talk a little bit about the types of technology that have come online that enable that for the law department. So I want to start with the evolution of legal spend technology. I think one of the very first projects that I ever embarked upon as an independent consultant was to help one of what was then a new cool e-billing startup and what is now a legacy e-billing provider, help them build an ROI tool so they could go to their prospective clients and say, here is the ROI from e-billing. And we found that there are really three very distinct areas of value for those e-billing tools. The first, especially back then, was process. There was the paper process of bills moving around in and this is going to make me sound really old, in inter-office envelopes to get approved around the law department was time consuming and difficult. And just the process of like manual review line by line with no automated help was difficult. So there's a lot of value there. Even back 20 years ago, most law departments had somewhat robust outside counsel guidelines, but enforcing them in a paper environment was functionally impossible. You just couldn't, it was, you know, a bill might literally be 800 pages long, 200 pages long. You couldn't see the enforcement of your guidelines. Those two, even in the early days, were providing lots of value to the clients, to the customers that used e-billing tools. But what never did back then, and what was sort of the unfulfilled promise of e-billing, was using the data to make better decisions. And what we've done over the years with some of these new tools, some of these e-billing companies have done better on that side with data, and some new tools have come online that I know you two are using. But we've evolved towards from e-billing to spend management, where you can use your spend information not only to figure out what things cost and what they should cost, but also can even make better decisions about where you should be providing your resources and how you should be, what firms you should be using and where you should be using ALSPs or other providers, and even help you understand the work that is getting done to determine what needs to happen to run the law department. What should be settled? What should be managed out? What contract elements are important? All of that, or a lot of that, is endemic within spend data. And Arun, I think it was in one of our planning calls when you coined you used the phrase weaponizing data. Can you maybe talk a little bit about what you mean by that?
Yeah, and can you see me again, Brad? I overheated my iPad. Sorry about that. Just wanted to make sure you guys can see me properly and hear me.
Yeah, honestly, your face is a little dark, but your camera's working fine.
Yeah, so what we really wanted to do was, kind of take the data that we found. We used a tool called Legal Decoder. They came to us, and one of the things that I kind of found was that there was very little transparency into our bills. And it was really difficult for us. We have so much outside counsel spend data, doing any kind of use of that data, or we had no way to look into that data. And so part of this was me trying to use technology to try and figure out, where are potential savings? How am I going to identify them? And is there a tool out there that can help me identify those things? So part of this was me going through the process of trying to look and find out a data solution or a technology solution that would help me kind of get that transparency into the data and figure it out. And so where Legal Coding came along, I liked their model. They took, we did a proof of concept, took about $15 million worth of billing data, scraped through the data. Their AI tool reads the bills, kind of looks at potential savings and kind of flags, kind of identifies areas where there are potential savings for us, and comes back to us and says, okay, so what do you want to do with this data? And so this is where I kind of thought about this and kind of coined the phrase weaponizing the data. And I think that's a really kind of mercenary way of looking at it, because I don't want to torpedo people with this data. But what I do want to do is kind of use it and try and figure out the best way to actually use this data to increase savings, increase transparency for the organization, and for us to work with our law firms as partners to say, hey, we now have a lot greater transparency into our data. We can compare it and benchmark it to other data that's out there in the market. This is what we're finding, and this is the way we'd like to approach this with you to figure out if we could partner better with you, if there's something else that we should be doing, if there's a different way of doing this. But at the same time, internally, can we break down, using this data, the different legal tasks that are there, who's doing those tasks, whether we're getting efficiency for that money, and then move that task to somewhere else? And I think, Brad, that's something that you've already looked at.
Yeah, I think that's right. Hey, real quick, Arun, your audio is cutting in and out of a bit, so maybe try without the video, or if you can maybe see what you can do.
I'll move around a little bit.
That. Yeah, it sounds better already, I think.
Yeah, I will see what I do. Yep. Yep.
Okay. Sorry about that, everybody. And what we've seen is that, or what we're seeing is that it's really these AI-powered systems that enable the kind of data work that you're talking about. So let me talk for a few minutes about what those systems can do, what these modern systems can do. First thing is, look, what's the old phrase, garbage in, garbage out. And the UTBMS codes are a problem. I'm former chair of the UTBMS subcommittee, so I will own it, but it is a problem. Too many different law departments customize their codes, so there's no standard on this. Even though it's supposed to be a standard, it's not really a standard. And very many lawyers either are inaccurate in their coding or lazy about their coding, or in some cases have sort of, been trained like Pavlov's dog to know that, like, if you code something this way, it will get bounced, but if you code something that way, which is also defensible, it won't get bounced. They sort of learned these lessons. So UTBMS is difficult and problematic. Using AI, some of these systems kind of read past the UTBMS codes. What we've learned, or what they believe anyway, is that while the coding itself is inaccurate, the narratives tend to be accurate. And one thing that AI tools are good at is reading narratives and organizing data, organizing unstructured data. So rather than trying to structure the data manually into UTBMS codes, instead, the trend seems to be to not have the attorneys who are doing the work structure the data, instead just have them use narratives and then let these tools structure the data on the back end. There seems to be a lot of success from that. Again, there's a big law department like both of yours, or even a smaller law department like yours, Arun, large amounts of data, huge amounts of data, at least, or a better way to put it is huge amounts of data in our little legal world. But if you think about kind of the real world out there, not that much data and not that complicated data either. I mean, if there are AI tools that can, determine the speed of the car that is in front of me, there's certainly AI tools that can read, so to speak, or analyze spend data and organize that in a way that you guys can make better decisions. And that includes improving budgeting and spend expectations. So again, these tools can take all that data and organize it in a way and allow you to basically ask questions of the data in order to better understand what you should be spending and create better budgets. And again, force your firms to live within those parameters, either by forcing them to live up to those budgets or by using RFP systems where the spend is expected or you have an idea what the answers are going to be, or simply by complaining to them after the fact when things cost more than you think they should have. Data is the engine behind alternative fee arrangements. The only way there's kind of two methods as far as I know to determine an alternative fee arrangement, especially a flat fee, maybe three. One is this, like just sort of put your finger in the air and guess what it should cost. One is chunk it out so that you're only sort of making that guess for a limited amount of work at a time. And the third is to use that data to understand what a matter would cost on that basis and figure out a way that is fair to de-risk that from the law department and move the risk to the law firm in a way that's fair for everybody. So data is the engine behind alternative fee arrangements. And again, some of these tools do this and some don't, and we're going to talk a little bit about this in a few minutes, but can we compare your spend or your expected spend to industry benchmarks? Can we look at what a matter costs industry-wide and see if we can figure out what that should be compared to what you are going to spend or what you in your own law department are spending in order to sort of appropriately put pressure on your law firms to bring your spend within industry benchmarks. Or maybe you're doing great compared to industry benchmarks and you could either reward your law firms with a bonus or just an attaboy. So this is what the modern systems collect data and allow you to organize the data. And moving on, I want to talk a little bit about where the AI fits into these things. And before I do that, I want to talk, AI is very broad term. And you know, when I started work on the legal AI efficacy report, it started with the question of these service providers, these technology companies, all of a sudden, like we went from a world where legal was afraid of AI and wouldn't do anything around AI to a world where some of the vendors, like all they felt that they needed to do was say that it's an AI legal tool and people were going to be interested in buying it. It was shocking, how it switched on dime, unbelievable. But most potential buyers didn't even know where AI fits in or what it does. And then there was always this like big discussion about like, that's not artificial intelligence, that's machine learning, and they're different, which in my opinion, doesn't matter much. Like, you know, all we're talking about here is taking a question that you might have, and instead of answering it based on instinct and experience, answer it based upon data that's already been collected. When we're talking about AI, machine learning, all these terms, that's all we're talking about. You're simply answering questions with data that you used to have to answer with experience and guesswork. So where does AI fit into these spend tools? The first place is they often use natural language processing to convert that billing narrative into structured data. So again, sort of doing the work that UTBS codes are supposed to do. They also tend to use, usually machine learning, to analyze large volumes of data. And what they've done is, what these companies have done is trained their tools to learn based upon large volumes of data they've gotten from their clients, either from you, the client, or from other clients, or from public information or whatever, and figure out how to, and train their tools based upon that so that you can analyze large volumes of data. And there's also this issue, and I'm curious to hear your points of view on it, Arun and Brad. Some of these tools will take, in order for benchmarking, will learn from all of the data they have from all of the clients. So your actual spend data is not being commingled necessarily with other clients of that same technology tool, but the lessons they've learned, the algorithms they've built from your data are being commingled with others. I think it's safe to assume, and if you're going to buy one of these things, you definitely want to dig in on this, but let's assume for our purposes that there are no security issues with that these companies have the security dialed in, but still, you know, your competitors may be learning from your own information, and you might be learning from theirs, right? So, what do you guys think about that? I know that Brad, the tool that you use for some of the stuff I know does that. Maybe talk a little bit about how you feel about, if you feel comfortable with that information.
Well, thanks, Brad. I think I'll add to this. My perspective on AI is in the old days of programming, and I did programming back when I was an engineer. It was all about a deterministic algorithm, if then, and it spits out an answer. With AI, it's a probabilistic outcome. It's like highly probable that this is the answer. So that to me is what changed. What is AI? So as far as us as practitioners, that's sufficient understanding for me to say there's some value here. We switched platforms 4 years ago. One of the first things we did on our journey, this is kind of an aha moment I had. I'll share for folks that are trying to get a business case to get a transformation off the ground. But it took me 18 months. Well, the first question I asked, well, two questions. One is, what is everybody doing here? Meaning, what are the folks, the lawyers, doing with their day? And two, how much are we spending on outside counsel? And to answer the second question, it took me 18 months to get there, because the old system, we didn't really track it, and we had 300 different vendors with 300 different bills, all PDF'd. So one thing we did back then is engaged a vendor with AI to take all those disparate bills with disparate formats, put them through their tool, and it broke them up by reading the language on the line items of the bills, be able to assemble them in a normalized way, So I basically had a de facto billing tool with 2 years of bills in there, line item by line item, which we never had before. We asked the question, so now apply our own outside counsel guidelines to those tens of millions of dollars of prior spend. How much of that is outside of our own billing guidelines? And 25% of the spend historically for 2 years had been outside of our own guidelines. So that wasn't nefarious. It was just scope creep and we weren't able to watch it. So that was just tens of millions of dollars of savings right there if we could just get our arms around what are we actually being billed and is it within our rules. I'll bring that example, Brad, and I guess later we'll talk about what we have now and what we're doing next.
Yeah, you sort of started us along that path, so why don't we keep going, Brad? Just maybe talk a little bit. You started talking about your journey, but maybe why don't you sort of tell your story?
Yeah, so I'll weave a story here of what we've been up to. I mentioned earlier that we've, I'm very proud of it, my team and my chief legal officer for the ambition of what we've been through. We've done quite our own little disruption inside on this journey. But the heart of it was, if we were to intentionally design this legal organization, what would it look like? That's kind of the heart of it. And you look at two cost centers, and one of them are the lawyers that we have in-house, and the other one, of course, is the outside counsel. And I'll talk about both of those arenas. But let me make this clear. I believe through benchmarking that probably all in-house legal functions are maybe 2 to 4% of the cost structure of an entire company. So the name of the game is not cost out, although that is one benefit, is if it is so desired, can be delivered. But the name of the game here, I think, is to give our legal team, probably the most innovative and smartest group in any company, back some time to focus on growth and innovation. That's the play. So back to those two arenas. So first was the in-house spend and effort and what are we doing there. And to get at that, we needed data. So we put in 12 major pieces of technology, including e-billing, matter management, and data and document management, to understand what is the nature of our work, who's doing the work, and could that work be done by somebody else? That was the main play there, to get data with some technology. Two, we stood up what we call a toolkit that includes different teams of people who can do that work. Many of them are vendors, they're partners on our team. So we have offshore lawyers, we've got ALSPs, we've got some cool vendors that do discovery.
Brad, I think it's okay to name your. I think it's okay to name your partners. I think they'd appreciate it.
Oh yeah, okay.
The audience would
so
too,
we
so
use
feel free, yeah.
we use Onnit. Onnit is our e-billing and matter management tool. Got a long way within, very sophisticated rollout. We did 2 acquisitions, so we got wall-to-wall Onnit. iManage is our document management tool, and we're integrating those together. So when my lawyer fires up a brand new matter, they've got an electronic filing cabinet there for their files. On top of that, we're going to put some AI tools in furtherance of our knowledge management journey to help my lawyers be able to find prior knowledge. All that's how we're helping our lawyers. We did an activity analysis to understand where our lawyers are spending their time, both in tasks and on different types of law. And what that showed us is that in each one of those types of law, we know the hidden factory, how many people are doing the work, how many FTEs, but also how much of their time, what proportion of their time is work that could be done by a strong paralegal, i.e. how much nurse work are my doctors doing? That's all on the in-house team, the intentional design of our team. And we needed data to get that. We put in a whole bunch of technology, stood up a whole bunch of alternative resources to be able to allow them to play up to the top of their license. On the outside counsel side, we're looking at it 2 ways. First of all, as I mentioned, we did a baseline where we were and what we did. And we put our billing guidelines in our billing tool. So now it's automatically our billing guidelines in there. We have a vendor now named Sterling Analytics who reviews the bills manually for the time being to see if we can save any money there. But if you look philosophically or strategically about our spend, we looked at our partners. We went from 300 to 30. We now have a nice panel, and we do not have an adversarial relationship with our panel, our 30 law firms. And we do not try to grind them down on fees. We try to get to the right level based on our spend. But that's how we're working with our partners. It's a relationship. It's a long-term relationship. We want to be able to enable our lawyers to do good law, full stop. But when it comes to saving money, a few things we've done. One is the incentive structure of in-house is often diluted because the lawyers just write a bill and send it off to the business. The business complains a little bit, but they pay it. But we swept all the enterprise budget under me and my chief legal officer. And now we're watching that budget. And we win or lose by how we manage that. There's accountability. But when we look at saving money, we're looking at two ways to do that. One, and these are AI related. One is the additional transparency that comes with, and these are, I'm going to mention a couple of vendors that are on my roadmap. Bodala, companies like Bodala help give insight into what are comparable per hour costs. And 90% of what I spend in outside counsel is per hour still. So I will now have the ability to answer a big question that has not been answered. How much should that matter have cost me? How much could that matter have cost me? Even though I'm going to allow my lawyers to pick their outside counsel firm, they will have guidelines and they've got the ability to disaggregate that work and get it in the right hands. But that new transparency that we have, I think, is a game changer for my company, but also a game changer in the market. So to have that outside perspective, what it could have cost me elsewhere. The other angle is what role does AFAs have and what role do auctions have? I believe that's the future. I believe it's a win-win for my law firm and for me to have a fixed fee arrangement so that now my law firm can start concentrating on productivity and actually getting some juice out of that deal versus trying to, grind their dollars per hour down. So that to me are companies like Pursuit or these auctioning tools that allow us to have predictability in our spend, and there's real savings there for in-house counsel to have an auction. But for outside counsel to be able to take advantage of their today's capacity, and they got some extra capacity, they might want to make sure that their team is fully engaged, and they'll do a deal on the price, and they can cap it at a fixed fee. So those are some things that we've done with our operating model and looking at our spend and how we're leveraging these drivers to help us save money. By the way, last year we should be spending 30% less on business as usual matters this year as a result of that.
Great. So Brad, that was amazing, and but I'm looking forward to hearing from Arun on really the same question about his journey. I know that Providence is not nearly as far along as TIAA is in this journey, which I think is really good because, I think for a lot of legal operations people and even some of the folks at law firms sitting out there on the call, what you just described, Brad, sounds terrifying and daunting. So before I turn this over to Arun, I do want to just invite folks to ask any questions they might have in the module, and we will try to get to them by the end of the session. So, Arun, why don't you talk about what you've been working on so far at Providence St. Joe's?
Yeah, and so really I came into this about a year and a half ago and asked the same questions. I mean, I'm very envious of where Brad is with his model right now. He really has clearly moved the needle really far to the right-hand side. And I was just asking, how much are we spending on legal? How do we capture that information? How do we know whether we're getting, at the end of the day, it comes down to how do we know whether we're getting good value for our money or not? We're a mission-driven organization. So as I said at the beginning, everything that we spend or we save on legal can be put back into the mission. So just asking, you know, what have we done in the past to monitor the law firms? How have we managed external counsel before? What kind of transparency have we had into that relationship? All of these questions, you know, I'm working on answers for all those questions. And, you know, in the old days, it used to be that, like, as Brad referenced before, the corporate people would, you know, if you said to them, well, you can't really predict how much we're going to have in legal spend, you know, you're just going to have to put up a number. And then if you hit that number, great. If you don't, then it was a bad year for legal. They don't want to hear that anymore. And they're asking different kinds of questions right now. And so, you know, working with the CLO to try and figure out ways to get increased transparency into our bills, as well as looking at law firm consolidation. You know, we work with 86 firms. We're a smaller organization in terms of legal spend. And so we want to consolidate that down into partners that we can work with where we know that we're getting good pricing. But my initial kind of approach to this was, okay, you know, where are we spending our money right now? Let's kind of get a breakdown of that. Go to the AP department and say, okay, can you give me a rundown of everything that's been charged to the various legal GL codes around the organization? Okay, let's take some of those bills. Let's run them through a tool and see what we've actually been paying for. You know, how do we assess whether we're getting that good value for money or not? And, you know, originally I went to some of the lawyers and asked, you know, when you look at a bill, you know, what's your judgment call? How do you figure out if we're getting value for money? And the response oftentimes, Brad, was, you know, if it looks reasonable, we just pay it. Well, you know, one man's reasonable is another man's completely outrageous. And so, you know, having some objectivity around that, having some measure that benchmarks us against how much that task should cost in the market. I mean, at the end of the day, we want to make sure that the right person is doing the right work at the right level, taking the right amount of time for the right price. I just want to get value for money. And as Brad said, you know, this isn't a squeeze. We're not trying to squeeze our law firms down. They're a business. They have a right to make money the same way that everybody else has the right to make money. But at the same time, we want to make sure that the money that we save is good for the organization and that we're getting value for that money. So what we've tried to do is trying to take that data. We've been working with Legal Decoder. They've identified some kind of potential savings categories. And this comes back to about weaponizing the data. What do we do with that at that point? They identified a significant amount of money for us that they said, well, you know, these are potential savings. Now, you know, first stop, you know, my first inclination was to go to the law firms and say, hey, there's all this money that's been left on the table here. We'd like some of that back, please. Now, obviously, that's not going to work. That's not the kind of adversarial relationship that we want. We want to have a partnership relationship. So I was like, well, where do we start with this? Well, the most obvious place to start is the outside counsel guidelines. You know, those are the rules of dating. We've told you what we want. And as someone who used to work inside a law firm, you know, those are the most ignored documents out there. I mean, in-house departments put a lot of time and effort into developing those outside counsel guidelines to say, this is how we'd like to be treated. And then, you know, afterwards, they're kind of ignored until you actually kind of enforce them. And so what we'd like to do is kind of take some of the data that we're finding on things like, you know, whether the right person at the right level is doing this work, whether matters are overstaffed or not, feed that into our outside counsel guidelines and gradually change the nature of the relationship to say, okay, if this is a partnership, we've laid out pretty clearly how we'd like to be treated. If we're not going to be treated like that, then we're going to take some action and kind of just look at that and say, well, we're probably not going to pay for that thing. I mean, that's kind of my starting point on this journey right now, because I feel like there's a lot of money that we can save. And again, it's not about grinding them down. It's just about kind of getting that transparency into some value for money on our legal spend.
Great. Thanks, Arun. So each of you talked a little bit about what you expect in the future. So I want to sort of make sure that we have time, as you just started to allude to, Arun, to talk about incentives, right? Because grinding down firms is not the answer. You know, I don't think any of us believe that an adversarial relationship with the exact people that you're relying on to keep your company out of the deepest trouble it can get into is really a good model. So, Arun, let's start with you, but let's maybe talk about some of the incentives that you've put in place or thinking about putting in place to help your firms become better partners? And then, Brad, of course, I'll ask you the same question in a few minutes.
So as we're at the start of this journey, we're looking at things like, should we have bonus incentives out there? Should we look for percentage savings? Diversity is a really big kind of topic for us, and it's something that's a driver within our legal department. So should we put some metrics around that to say, okay, if you can hit these benchmarks, then there's going to be an extra bonus for you, or we're going to pay it within 30 days, or there can be a 5% extra on there. We're looking at just different ways to incentivize the behavior to get to the point where we feel like, okay, this is a good value situation for us. We feel like the firm understands what we're trying to get at. We understand that they're a business that they need to run, and their internal kind of productivity. We're hoping to drive that internal productivity conversation with them so that by kind of specifying it within the outside counsel guidelines, we're trying to give them the incentive to change internally. And that may be everything from changing the way that they allocate origination through to changing their comp model. I mean, I have some pretty strong views on law firm compensation models, but I'll save that for another session.
Great. Brad, how about you?
Yeah, and I'll add what we're doing, and so I mentioned, but sweeping the budget for the entire firm in one place. We chopped that up and we gave it to the GCs that are responsible for different lines of business, and they got a budget that had a haircut, and we asked them to live within that. In addition to that reduced budget, we gave them newly negotiated rates with our law firms. We gave them some alternative law firms and alternative legal service providers, and we have a team, a captive team offshore to help break up that work, and sometimes just free up their own team to be able to handle that work internally. So that's how we've been able to play that. But we're very intrigued with the model of the AFAs and the fixed fee, so that there's a win-win on both sides of the table. And that's easier said than done. But that the incentive for the law firms to understand the work and then understand what price they're making the price, rather than me, coming in with some sort of a negotiating ploy to get them to give me a discount on rates. Another new cost savings initiative we're taking here is early pay discounts, inspired by a best practice in the industry by Purdue Pharma. And I believe they have is the faster you pay, the more you get. And we're shooting for internally, and our new arrangements with our outside counsel is going to be 4% early pay discount if we pay within 15 days, I believe is what we're shooting for. So that'll be a nice way to get a win-win with our partners. I'll add this too, Brad, just real quick. Arun, you said this, but because it's a long partnership and we do care about these companies, then we also want them to align to our values. So the inclusion and diversity ethos is very important to us, and we know it's very important to them. So we've built the ability to measure that at the firm level, but also at the matter level. So to drive this change, it's especially powerful if there are matter managers who are making the buying decision and they care about this a lot. They're the ones that are going to want to understand, who are you putting on my team? Can I influence the makeup of that team? And that's how we think we're going to be able to actually move the needle on ID versus just measure it.
I think that's a great point, Brad, and I think that's also, I think the D&I issue can be a good analogy or analog for sort of the rest of the legal spend discussion. And what I'm getting at is that, where if you're going to make an impact around the D&I space, it's going to be by making sure that you have diverse attorneys on your matters. It's by making sure that diverse attorneys are involved in getting the work. It's making sure that the 6 through 8 year attorneys become in control of your work, so that the firm has to make them a partner because they're in control of a bunch of the TIAA. Which is very different from, oh, look, he's on the RFP, or, oh, look, we brought her to the pitch. And it's a great example of where data provides the answer. And which is just like everything else in legal spend. Just providing you a rate is such a small part of the story and so easily gained that it doesn't help that much. But when you have the right data and can dig in on all the questions, including the D&I one, it's a game changer. It changes everything.
Yep.
So get back. We got a great question from the audience, and I want to give you guys a few minutes to speak to it before we hit the top of the hour. The question is this: when using AI to look for value with respect to outside legal spend, are you somehow incorporating result or outcome as part of your analysis? And if so, how? Are either of you doing that yet? And if so, how? And if not, have you any thoughts as to how you can do that?
Brad, I apologize. I was reading the Q&A and I missed the question, actually. I apologize. Sorry.
Go ahead, Brad, I can. So I mean, how do we incorporate the outcome? We'd like to get to that value partnership, but looking at the data, looking at the flags that are picked up within the analysis that we've done of the data, this is where the rubber really meets the road for me, because I felt like, well, what are we going to do with this? How are we best going to retrain, or how are we going to work on this relationship with our firm by using this data not against them, but in partnership with them to say, this is the value that we'd like to get to. And then trying to look at where the flags are, where we think that it's, most kind of beneficial for both of us to analyze what's come out of this data. So say overstaffing. So let's look at overstaffing. Do we want to go and be punitive about this and say, hey, there's far too many people on this matter, drill down into every matter? No, what we want to do is say to the law firm, look, we'd like to see efficiency around staffing. This is the data that's been produced, and this is the result that we'd like to get to.
Great. Brad, do you want to take a crack at that? How, if at all, is outcome or result part of your analysis on which firms to choose as opposed to just spend?
Yeah, that's a tough one. I know Harvard Law School Center for the Professional Practice, which we're part of a small group on that, is trying to crack the code on how to measure quality of law. And here we're leaving it up to basically the senior lawyers to talk about quality. But it does beg the question, and Arun, I think you touched on this, is the overproduction that goes on. But lawyers are wired for perfection, and they're wired to work hard. And if there's time available to do the work, they'll keep working it. So I think that is they've already gotten to the answer. They're already A+ work, and they may continue to work it. And that's where I think we can help them work differently.
Yeah. And the fact is, there are a lot of different firms and a lot of different lawyers that can provide a quality result. So while I think in a perfect world, some sort of analysis that includes quality and results and spend that can all be tied into one number, would be amazing. But if for the time being, if we can quantify the spend and qualify the result and tie them together, because the purchasing is still made largely by human beings, that would be way better than where we are mostly now. So I think that's not a bad place to achieve, and probably a good stopping point for us. We have reached the top of the hour. I do want to thank our panelists, Brad Rogers from TIAA and Arun Mistry from Providence St. Joe's. If you'll allow me a 10-second pitch, if you're interested in some of these tools and an analysis of them, please visit blicksteingroup.com. You can take a look at the Legal AI Efficacy Report. And I'd finally like to thank our audience and our friends at the Legal Value Network for hosting us today. I see one other question just came in. We're running out of time, but we'll make sure we reach back to you guys online, or offline, I should say. Thanks, everybody. Everyone, stay safe, stay healthy. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Brad. Thanks, everybody.